A lonely billionaire finds a little girl abandoned in the rain, clinging to a worn-out doll and soaked in sadness. He lets her stay for just one night, just one. But when he discovers what she left behind, something in him breaks. He falls to his knees, overwhelmed by a feeling he hasn't known in years. Some stories aren't just watched, they're felt. Before continuing with the story, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. Your help is very important. Rain fell hard over Chicago, drenching the streets in silver and noise. Wind howled between the buildings, slapping against glass with a desperation that made the night feel heavier than usual. It was just past 11 when Benjamin Carter stepped out of the revolving doors of Carter Industries, a tall silhouette wrapped in a long charcoal coat, briefcase in one hand, his expression unreadable. His driver hadn't arrived yet. He stood beneath the overhang of the entrance, impatient but composed, checking his watch with a frown. The sidewalk glistened under the city lights, puddles stretching like cracked mirrors. Most of the building's lights had already gone out. He liked leaving last. It gave him control. Silence. Then something moved near the base of the stairs. At first it looked like a discarded bag or coat, sodden and crumpled. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized it was neither. It was a child, no more than 6 years old, curled into herself, arms wrapped tight around a stained, lopsided doll. Her clothes were several sizes too big and soaked through. Her shoes were mismatched. Her hair clung to her face, tangled and dark with rain. She was shivering, but she didn't cry. Benjamin stared for a moment. He wasn't the kind of man who stopped for strangers, much less children on the street. But there was something in the stillness of the girl, something unsettling in how she held herself perfectly still, like she'd learned the city would only notice her if she moved. He approached slowly, shoes splashing in the puddles. "Where's your mother?" he asked. The girl looked up, her eyes sharp despite the fatigue. "She's gone." "How long have you been out here?" A pause. Then she shrugged, hugging the doll tighter. Benjamin exhaled through his nose, the wind cutting against his face. He glanced down at the doll, its stitching uneven, the fabric patchy. Something about it struck him, familiar. Then he remembered. Years ago, Carter Industries had launched a limited edition charity toy line, a gesture of goodwill after a particularly aggressive acquisition. The dolls were supposed to symbolize hope. He had personally rejected the first prototypes. They'd been too fragile, he said, too poorly made. This one, in the girl's arms, was one of them. It had to be. He looked back at her. "What's your name?" "Emma," she said quietly. Something in the way she spoke it made him flinch. She didn't ask for help, she didn't plead. She just answered, straightforward, resigned. Benjamin straightened. "Come inside, just for a bit." Emma didn't move. "I'm not going to hurt you," he added. "You'll be warm. There's food." Still, she hesitated. But then, slowly, she stood. Her legs were thin, too thin for a child. She clutched the doll to her chest and followed him without a word. The building's night staff blinked in surprise as Benjamin walked past reception with a soaked child trailing behind him. He didn't stop. He led her to the executive lounge on the 34th floor, a private space with plush furniture, a small kitchen, and most importantly, heat. He took off his coat and handed it to her. She wrapped it around herself, disappearing inside its folds. "Sit," he said, pointing to the leather armchair near the fireplace. "You're soaked through." She climbed up without protest. He moved to the kitchen and heated milk. He had no idea if she even liked milk, but it seemed right. A few minutes later, he handed her a warm mug. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "What happened to your mom?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. Emma didn't look at him. "She didn't wake up. I waited a long time." The room fell quiet. Benjamin sat across from her, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. His world was made of logic and contracts, of risk assessments and leveraged assets. This moment didn't belong in any of those calculations. He studied her, her small face, hollow cheeks, eyes too large for her frame. Children weren't supposed to look like that. "I can call someone," he said after a long silence. "Social services. They'll find you a place." Emma flinched. He stopped. Something in her face made him feel like he'd just slammed a door instead of opened one. "Do you have anywhere else to go?" he asked more gently. She shook her head. "Family." "No one." He sat back in his chair, the fireplace crackling between them. This was supposed to be temporary. A few hours, a warm room, a blanket. But temporary had a way of shifting when your life was built on precision, and something finally broke through. "All right," he said. "You can stay tonight? Just tonight?" She looked up, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Later, when she fell asleep on the couch, curled around the doll like it was a part of her, Benjamin didn't leave. He watched her from his seat, his coat still wrapped around her tiny frame. Something inside him stirred, a weight he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The next morning he made phone calls, hospitals, police, shelters, no reports of a missing girl named Emma Collins. But a body had been found the night before, female, mid-20s, discovered in an alley 6 blocks from Carter Tower. No ID, but there had been a child's footprint near the scene. The timeline matched. So did the location. Benjamin stared at the coroner's report, the words blurring at the edges. Deceased, Alice Collins, cause of death, hypothermia and untreated illness, unclaimed. He stood motionless for a long time after that. By noon, he called his lawyer. "I need to file for emergency custody," he said. "Today." The lawyer hesitated. "Are you sure, Benjamin? This isn't just a gesture, it's a commitment. You don't have children." "I do now." The snow had arrived early in Chicago. It blanketed the rooftops and quieted the streets below, softening the city's usual roar into something still and contemplative. From the top of Horizon Tower, Benjamin Carter looked out through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, coffee cooling in his hand, the skyline nothing more than a grey blur of glass and light. Behind him, Emma sat on the rug, legs crossed, quietly brushing the hair of a plastic horse. It had been 6 days since he brought her in, 6 days since he stepped away from everything he knew, predictability, distance, control, and stepped into something uncertain, messy, real. Emma didn't ask many questions. She didn't cry. She ate quietly, slept lightly, and spoke only when spoken to. But her presence filled the space like a heartbeat, gentle, steady, and impossible to ignore. At first, she had hovered near the corners of the penthouse, like a ghost unsure of its welcome. Now she wandered more freely, not as if the place belonged to her, but as if she were trying to memorize every part of it before it disappeared. Benjamin noticed it all. He hadn't planned on keeping her this long. The emergency custody order had been meant to buy time, a few days, enough to ensure she wouldn't fall through the cracks of a system that devoured children like her. But each morning he found her still there, drawing on scraps of printer paper, rearranging the buttons on the remote controls, lining up her shoes by the front door, and something inside him resisted the idea of letting her go. His lawyer, Peter Halley, arrived that afternoon with a stack of documents and a look of carefully veiled disbelief. "You're really going through with this," Peter said, placing the files on the kitchen counter. Benjamin didn't look up from where he stood, watching Emma turn pages in a picture book. "I am," Peter sighed. "You do realize the process isn't simple. There will be background checks, psychological evaluations, home inspections. I've built entire corporations from nothing," Benjamin replied. "I can handle paperwork." Peter leaned against the counter. "That's not what I mean. This isn't a merger. It's a child." Benjamin finally looked at him. His expression wasn't defensive. It was something rarer, vulnerable. "I know." Peter studied him for a moment, then opened one of the folders. "There's another complication. We received a letter from someone claiming to be the girl's biological father, Daniel Reeves." The name meant nothing to Benjamin, but the implication hit like a blow to the chest. He wants to be involved? Claims he never knew about the child, says he's clean now, has a job, wants to step up. Benjamin turned toward the window, jaw clenched. "I'll fight it," he said quietly. "You might not win. I have to try." That night, Benjamin sat at the edge of Emma's bed. She had fallen asleep, clutching the doll again, her fingers curled around the hem of its faded dress. Her breathing was soft but uneven, as if even in sleep she expected to wake to another world falling apart. He reached out and gently pulled the blanket higher over her shoulder. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered. The following days blurred into routines neither of them had planned, but both began to depend on. Breakfasts with toast and too sweet juice, quiet afternoons with puzzles and muted cartoons. Dinners shared in silence, broken only by soft questions from Emma, always small, always cautious. "Do you live here alone?" she asked one evening. "I did." "Why?" He paused. "I thought it was better that way." "Is it?" He looked at her. She stared at her plate, waiting as if afraid of the answer. "Not anymore," he said. She smiled just slightly and returned to her food. The apartment, once a monument to isolation, began to shift. Emma's drawings filled the empty spaces. Her footsteps echoed through the rooms with quiet familiarity. The staff, limited and discreet, treated her with a reverence born from curiosity and caution. Even Rosa, the long-time housekeeper, softened in her presence, offering warm milk and letting her braid her graying hair. But the shadow of Daniel Reeves loomed larger with each passing day. Benjamin received updates through Peter. Daniel had passed the drug tests, held down a job at a metal shop, attended therapy. On paper, he was the kind of redemption story courts liked, and legally he had a claim. It didn't matter to Benjamin that he was late, that he'd missed the nights of cold pavement and empty stomachs, that he hadn't been there when Emma watched her mother take her last breath. None of that erased the fact that now he wanted in, and that terrified Benjamin more than he cared to admit. He wasn't afraid of losing a case. He was afraid of losing her. One night after Emma had gone to sleep, Benjamin sat in his study, reading through Daniel's petition. It was neat, polished, persuasive. It spoke of regret, of change, of second chances. But what struck him most wasn't the language. It was the fact that Emma hadn't asked once about her father. Not once. She hadn't even asked about her mother again, as if some part of her had locked those memories away, choosing instead the safety of the now, of warm blankets and quiet mornings, of someone who stayed. And yet none of that mattered to the law. He closed the file and stood, the city lights reflecting off the window in front of him. In the glass, his own reflection looked tired, changed, human. He hadn't expected to care. But now, the thought of Emma being taken from him was unbearable. The door behind him creaked open. Emma stood there, sleepy-eyed and barefoot, her doll trailing from one hand. "I had a bad dream," she said. Without hesitation, he crossed the room and scooped her into his arms. She clung to him without words, resting her head against his chest. "Do you want me to stay with you tonight?" he asked. She nodded into his shoulder. He carried her back to her room and sat beside her bed until she drifted off again, her hand still clutching his sleeve. And he knew. He would fight until there was nothing left to give. The morning Daniel Reeves arrived was uneventful in every visible way. The sky was overcast, the wind slicing clean through the narrow alleys of Chicago. The lobby of Carter Industries hummed with its usual muted intensity, people moving with purpose, eyes forward, voices low. But for Benjamin Carter, that day vibrated with a quiet dread. Daniel had requested the meeting himself, through his lawyer, through Peter, through the proper channels. Benjamin hadn't responded immediately. He wasn't sure he wanted to meet the man. He wasn't sure he could. And yet, when the elevator doors opened and Daniel stepped into the waiting room of the executive floor, Benjamin was already standing there, still as stone. He wasn't what Benjamin expected. Younger, lean, his face marked more by wear than age. A worn jacket, clean but old. His posture was careful, rigid not from arrogance but restraint. He looked like a man used to being looked at the wrong way, and this time, determined to endure it. Benjamin motioned to the private conference room with a tilt of his head. Daniel followed. The door closed with a soft click. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Daniel, voice steady, broke the silence. "I want to be part of her life." Benjamin remained standing. "You waited 6 years. I didn't know she existed. That's convenient." "No," Daniel said, his gaze unwavering. "It's tragic." Benjamin studied him. There was no smugness, no manipulation in Daniel's expression, only exhaustion and sincerity, dangerous things when worn by someone the court might favor. "I've read your file," Benjamin said at last. "You've been clean for 3 years, holding steady work, therapy, volunteering. On paper, you look like redemption." Daniel didn't flinch. "That's because I've earned every word of it." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "You weren't there when she needed someone, when her mother died in an alley, when she slept in the rain." "I didn't know," Daniel repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "If I had God, if I had, I would have moved heaven and earth." Benjamin's silence stretched long and cold. Daniel took a breath. "I'm not here to take her from you. I don't even know her yet. I just want a chance to see her, to let her know I exist." Benjamin spoke carefully now. "She's just starting to feel safe, just starting to believe she's not going to be left behind again." Daniel nodded. "Then don't push me out. Let me be part of that." It would have been easier if Daniel had been angry or arrogant or careless, but he wasn't. He was calm, measured, human. That made him harder to hate. "I'll consider supervised visits," Benjamin said finally. Daniel nodded once. "That's all I'm asking." The meeting ended with a handshake neither man truly meant, and the heavy door closed on a storm that was only beginning to gather. When Benjamin returned home that night, Emma was in the studio. She was painting again, blue streaks and charcoal lines across a sheet that had been taped to the far wall. Her tongue poked slightly between her teeth, concentration fixed. He stood in the doorway, watching her, afraid to break the moment. "You always paint in silence?" he asked softly. She looked over her shoulder. "The colors talk for me." He stepped in, crouched beside her, careful not to touch the drying canvas. "What are they saying today?" She shrugged. "That the sky is too big sometimes. But it's not mean, just lonely." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't try. Instead, he sat with her until the sun dipped below the skyline. Later, as they cleaned brushes, he said, "I met someone today." Emma glanced up, alert. "His name is Daniel. He might be your father." She didn't speak, just looked at him, the silence between them now full of weight. "He wants to meet you. Do I have to?" "No," Benjamin said gently. "Not unless you want to." She nodded slowly, then turned back to her brush. That night she barely touched her dinner. She folded her napkin 4 times. She whispered to her doll. The first visit happened 3 days later. A neutral space was arranged, a supervised playroom with glass walls and warm lighting, tucked inside a private family center downtown. Benjamin didn't stay in the room, but he watched through the glass. Emma sat stiffly on one end of the table. Daniel sat on the other. A box of building blocks sat between them. Daniel didn't push. He asked if she liked dogs, said he once had one named Waffles, talked about fishing, about the stars in Denver, told her he carved the wooden bird himself. Emma barely responded. Her eyes flicked once to the door, where Benjamin stood. After 30 minutes, she stood up. "I'm tired," she said to the supervisor. The session ended early. At home, Benjamin said nothing. He didn't ask her how it went. He simply sat with her as she painted again, this time with broad red strokes, darker than before. Days passed. More visits followed. Emma didn't resist them, but she didn't open up either. She answered when spoken to, but never initiated. She smiled once, briefly, when Daniel made a joke about pigeons being city spies, but it faded quickly. Each night, she returned to Benjamin. Each night, she said the same thing when the lights went off. "You're not going to let them take me away, right?" And every night he answered the same way. "Never, not if I have any say." And each time, he meant it more. Then, one evening, Emma placed the wooden bird next to her doll on the nightstand. A quiet gesture, a sign of something shifting. Benjamin noticed, but when he looked at her, she only said, "Just in case." He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. Outside the safety of the penthouse, Daniel was moving. His lawyers filed a formal petition for joint custody, citing growing emotional contact and the right to parental presence. The court date was set. Benjamin read the documents in silence. Peter, seated across the room, tapped the paper. "They'll argue stability, biological rights, emotional progress." "I expected that," Benjamin replied. Peter hesitated. "But they're also filing for permission to relocate." Benjamin looked up sharply. "Denver. Daniel got a job offer there, full benefits. He's requesting permission to move with Emma." It was a knife through the ribs, 1,000 miles away. He stood, pacing toward the window, fists clenched. "She can't go." Peter nodded. "Then we fight. Hard." That night, Benjamin sat by Emma's bed again. She was awake, staring at the ceiling. "If I go with him," she said suddenly, "will you forget me?" Benjamin closed his eyes. "No, Emma. I'll never forget you, even if I'm not in the house anymore." "You'll always be in the house," he whispered, "even if you're not in the rooms." She rolled toward him, eyes glassy. "Then I'll stay in your sky too." And just like that, Benjamin knew. This wasn't a fight about who loved her more. It was about who would love her better, and he was not going to lose. The days leading up to the court hearing bled together, time bending beneath the weight of anticipation. Benjamin found himself awake before sunrise most mornings, standing in the cold kitchen with a cup of coffee he never drank. The city was quiet at that hour. The only movement was the low hum of snowplows pushing through slush on the streets below. Upstairs, Emma was still sleeping, but not soundly. Her dreams had turned restless. Sometimes she called out for her mother. Other times she called for him. Each time she did, Benjamin was there, waiting in the hallway, listening through the crack in her door, his pulse aching with every word. It wasn't just a legal matter anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was his life now, reshaped entirely around a small girl who had walked into it on a stormy night and never left. Everything else, stocks, schedules, expansion deals, had dulled at the edges. Even his staff noticed. Veronica, his COO, had started handling decisions without checking in, and the board had stopped asking why he missed meetings. He didn't care. He was preparing for war. The strategy wasn't just legal, it was emotional. His lawyer, Peter, warned him gently one morning as they reviewed affidavits and psychological evaluations. "The court doesn't want to see a billionaire playing savior," Peter said. "They want stability, attachment. They want to know she's loved and safe, that she's growing." Benjamin nodded, distracted. "And if love isn't enough?" Peter didn't answer. Later that day, he met with Grace again. She'd become an anchor in ways he hadn't anticipated. She was the one who reminded him to slow down, to eat, to be present. Not just as a guardian, but as a man trying to be something he never thought he would be, a father. "She's stronger than you think," Grace told him, folding Emma's laundry as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "But she still needs someone who's not afraid to fight for her." Benjamin hesitated. "I'm terrified." Grace looked up. "Good. That means it's real." The hearing was set for a Thursday. That morning, Emma stood at the edge of his office, already dressed. A small backpack hung from her shoulders. She looked smaller than usual in the heavy winter coat, the doll peeking out of the top zipper like a silent witness. "You don't have to come," Benjamin said gently. "You won't be asked to speak." "I know," she replied, "but I want to know what happens." He crouched down to her level. "Nothing will happen without you knowing. I promise." She nodded, then slipped her hand into his. In the courtroom, Daniel was already seated with his legal team. He looked different, cleaner, more composed, a haircut, a dark jacket, a folder in hand, but he still carried the weight of someone trying not to break. Benjamin sat across from him, Emma beside him, holding his sleeve with quiet insistence. The judge, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a calm demeanor, entered the room without fanfare. The proceedings began. The lawyers presented their cases. Peter emphasized emotional connection, trauma recovery, the importance of consistency. Daniel's side spoke of rights, rehabilitation, the bond of blood. Benjamin remained silent, his gaze fixed on the space between them. Then came the testimony. Emma wasn't called, but her psychological evaluations were read aloud. Observations from her therapist, notes from supervised visitations, patterns in behavior, drawings interpreted, progress tracked. The report was balanced, objective, but one line stayed with Benjamin. The child demonstrates a secure attachment to Mr. Carter, identifying him as her primary safe adult. Separation induces distress. Emotional cues suggest a sense of permanence has begun to take root. Daniel's attorney countered with structure, routine, long-term viability. They presented a job offer in Denver, pictures of a modest house, letters from neighbors. It sounded convincing. Then the judge spoke. "I've reviewed all evidence. I've listened to arguments from both sides. This is not a case about who is better or more deserving. It is a case about what is best for a child who has already endured more loss than most adults will in a lifetime." Benjamin's stomach tightened. "Therefore," the judge continued, "I am granting joint legal custody. Physical custody will remain primarily with Mr. Carter. Mr. Reeves will be permitted weekly supervised visits for the next 3 months, followed by a review. Relocation is denied at this time, as it would disrupt the child's current stability." Silence. Then relief. Daniel looked down, shoulders slack. He didn't protest. He didn't cry. He just nodded, accepting the ruling with the quiet resignation of a man who understood that loss and progress often looked the same. Emma squeezed Benjamin's hand. Back home, the mood was subdued but lighter. Emma drew quietly in the studio while Benjamin stood nearby, not speaking, just watching. She was sketching a large house with tall windows and a garden on the roof. Inside the house were 2 figures, one tall, one small, and next to them, a dog, a name written above the doorway in large block letters. "Ours." Benjamin smiled faintly. "We don't have a dog." Emma didn't look up. "Not yet." He walked over, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "You didn't let them take me." "I never will." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, anchoring himself. The war wasn't over, but they'd won this battle. Together. Peace returned, but not without weight. After the ruling, the penthouse fell into a strange stillness, one not of tension, but of quiet recalibration. Benjamin had won a piece of what he fought for, but it didn't feel like victory. Not entirely. There was no elation, no celebration, only an unspoken understanding between him and Emma that something had been defended, not claimed, preserved, not conquered. Outside, the snow continued to fall in slow, deliberate flurries. Inside, life moved on in a rhythm they were both still learning to trust. Emma didn't talk about the hearing. She didn't mention Daniel. She returned to her routines, reading with Ms. Rosa, painting in the studio, helping Grace bake bread that always ended up too dense. She smiled more now, but it was a cautious smile, a smile that asked, "Is it really over?" Benjamin saw it every time. He didn't push her. He knew better now. Emma needed time, space, safety, and what she needed most, he could finally offer, not through wealth or legal wins, but through presence. So he gave her that again and again. He made breakfast more often, not because she asked, but because she once said she liked the smell of toast. He sat beside her during cartoons he didn't understand, just to be near her when she laughed. He even learned the names of her imaginary characters: the fox with glasses, the grumpy bluebird, the princess who built things instead of waiting to be rescued. For the first time in years, Benjamin's days revolved around something other than himself. And strangely, it felt right. Still, Daniel's shadow never completely faded. Every Saturday at 10 a.m., he arrived at the family center for supervised visits. Emma went, never protested, but when she returned, she was quieter, more inward, not distressed, not afraid, just distant. Benjamin didn't ask for details, but he watched the way she clutched her doll tighter at night, or how she paused before drawing faces. Once, she painted a picture with 3 figures, one standing, one sitting, and one in between, half-colored, with no face at all. He asked about it gently. "That's someone deciding," she said. He didn't ask more. Daniel was trying, that much was clear. The reports from the visitation supervisor were positive. Respectful interaction, attempts at connection, no pressure, no guilt. But progress was slow, and that was the problem. Because Emma didn't need someone trying to love her, she needed someone who already did. One cold evening, Benjamin found himself standing at the balcony, watching the city pulse below. Grace joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "She's doing well," she said after a few quiet minutes. He nodded. "But you're not." He didn't respond right away. The truth sat heavy in his chest. "I'm afraid," he finally admitted. "Not of Daniel. Not really. But of not being enough. Of her waking up one day and wondering why I fought so hard to keep her. She already knows why. But what if love isn't enough?" Grace sipped her tea. "Then show her that love isn't the end. It's the beginning." He let the words settle. They didn't solve anything, but they gave him something to hold on to. A week later, Emma brought him a paper heart, carefully cut with rounded scissors, the edges jagged. "For Valentine's Day," she said. Benjamin blinked. "That's today." Emma nodded. "I made it for you." He knelt down, taking the heart like it was something fragile and holy. "Thank you," he said softly. "There's another one," she added, "but I didn't finish it." "For Daniel?" She nodded. "I don't know what to write on his." "That's okay," he told her. "You don't have to rush." She looked up at him. "You're the only one who always stays." He didn't say anything. He just pulled her into a hug and held her close, hoping it said enough. That night, Benjamin sat alone in the study, the paper heart resting on his desk beside his laptop. He hadn't opened his work email in over a week. Deadlines had passed. Memos went unread. But he didn't care. He picked up the heart and ran a finger along its edge. He remembered the girl in the rain, sitting on the steps with a doll that once came from his factory, a rejected product, like so many other things in his life. Except this time, he hadn't turned away. He'd knelt, spoken, stayed, and now he was no longer just a man trying to fix a mistake. He was a father. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened. Emma asked if Daniel could come to the apartment. The request came quietly while they were folding laundry. She didn't make eye contact, just smoothed the sleeves of her sweater and said, "Can he see where I live?" Benjamin didn't answer immediately. His instinct was no, to protect, to shield, to say that her space was sacred. But then he looked at her, the small courage in her voice, the control she was trying to take over her own story, and he realized this wasn't about Daniel. It was about her. So he nodded. "Yes, if you want him to." The visit was brief. Daniel brought a book she liked, stayed in the living room, admired her paintings. He was polite, awkward, a guest. Emma showed him her doll's new clothes, then returned to Benjamin's side when the tour ended. When Daniel left, Emma said nothing for a long time. Then finally she whispered, "He's not a stranger anymore." Benjamin reached for her hand. "And what is he?" She paused. "I think he's a chapter." Benjamin's chest tightened. "And what am I?" Emma looked up at him, steady now. "You're the story." He closed his eyes, because for the first time in his life, that was enough. Spring arrived reluctantly, pushing through the last grey breath of winter with shy blossoms and restless winds. In Chicago, seasons never changed gently. They snapped as if waking from something too deep to name. And in the quiet corners of the Carter penthouse, change was doing the same. Emma's laughter returned more frequently now, and her drawings, once dominated by solitary figures and dark skies, had started to feature windows full of yellow light, rooftops with birds, people standing close together. It was Grace who noticed first. "She's not just healing," she said one morning, watching Emma help fold napkins at the breakfast table. "She's choosing to stay present. That's different. That's a decision." Benjamin nodded, his eyes never leaving Emma. "And what happens if she starts choosing both?" Grace didn't answer. She just sipped her tea, then gave him a look that said, "You'll need to be strong enough to let her." Daniel's visits had become more natural, more fluid, still supervised, still within the court's limits, but no longer strained. Emma had begun to ask him questions about where he lived, what he liked, why he carved birds instead of buying them. Benjamin kept his distance during those hours, giving them space, though it burned in his chest each time she smiled at something Daniel said. He reminded himself, this wasn't about winning. This was about Emma. He said it over and over. Sometimes he even believed it. One Thursday evening, Benjamin came home late from a rare appearance at the office. The board had demanded an update, financial projections, expansion strategy, the kind of thing that used to animate him. But now it only drained him. Every minute spent there was a minute not spent here. When he walked into the penthouse, it was quiet, too quiet. Then he saw the note on the kitchen counter, written in Emma's blocky handwriting, "We're in the studio. Don't come in yet." His heart kicked a little, unsure if this was good or bad. He waited. 10 minutes, 15. Then the door opened. Emma stepped out, beaming. "We made something," she said. "We?" She nodded. "Me and Daniel." And Rosa helped a little. He followed her inside, and there it was, an entire mural on the far wall, done in washable paint, bright colors, simple lines. It was a house, not just any house, his house, the penthouse, the tall windows, the skyline beyond. The couch he always fell asleep on when Emma's nightmares kept him up, but it was what was inside the painted windows that stopped him. 3 figures, one tall, one small, and one just to the side, smiling, hand resting near but not quite touching. "I painted you," she said, pointing. "And me." Then her finger moved to the 3rd figure. "And that's Daniel. He's visiting." Benjamin knelt, studying the expressions she'd given them. His she had drawn with thick black eyebrows and a faint smile. Hers had bright eyes and a yellow dress. Daniel's had the softest colors, neutral tones but no sadness. "It's beautiful," he said. "Really?" Emma looked at him carefully. "Is it okay?" He swallowed, caught between the ache and the pride. "Yes," he said. "It's more than okay." She threw her arms around his neck and he held her tightly. Over her shoulder, he looked at the mural again. 3 people, 1 story. That weekend, Benjamin and Daniel sat together for the first time outside the confines of a visitation room. Just the 2 of them. A quiet coffee shop tucked beneath a bookstore Emma liked. Grace had suggested it. Neutral ground, but not sterile. Daniel stirred his drink slowly. "I didn't expect her to let me in this much," he said. "Not this soon." "She still holds back," Benjamin replied. "She trusts you. She trusts you too. Just differently." Daniel nodded. "I'm not trying to take your place." "You couldn't if you tried," Benjamin said, not with malice, just fact. Daniel looked down at his hands. "I still wake up wondering what would have happened if Alice had called me," he murmured. "If I just found her sooner. We don't get to rewrite the past." "No," Daniel agreed, "but maybe we get to build something with what's left." Benjamin took a sip of his coffee. "I think she's trying to do that, in her own way." Daniel looked out the window, the tension between them no longer sharp, just present. "I don't want her to feel like she has to choose." "She doesn't," Benjamin said. But that doesn't mean we don't. Their eyes met then. Two men on opposite sides of something neither of them ever expected to care so deeply about. And beneath the wariness, there was something almost like respect. That night, Benjamin found Emma asleep on the couch, one of Daniel's small wood carvings in her hand, a tiny fox this time. He sat beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake. On the coffee table was another drawing. This one showed just her and Benjamin sitting on a bench under a tree. No words, just a red heart in the sky above them. He stared at it for a long time. This was what mattered. Not the courts, not the claims, not the carved animals or the custody papers. This, a girl who trusted him to be her quiet place in a world that had already asked too much of her. And he would protect it, all of it, even if someday she chose to make room for Daniel too. May arrived with a softness that betrayed the months that came before. The wind no longer bit at the skin, the trees bloomed as if nothing had ever been broken, and the city felt temporarily less cruel. Inside the Carter penthouse, life had settled into something resembling a rhythm, if not entirely normal, at least familiar. Emma now moved through the space like she belonged there. She no longer hesitated to open cabinets or correct Benjamin when he burned toast. She left her drawings in the hallway, her socks under the couch, her giggles echoing down corridors that used to sound like silence. Her presence had not only filled the space, it had transformed it. And Benjamin had changed too. He no longer feared the fragility of their bond. He no longer tiptoed around the past. He had stopped trying to fix every hurt and instead learned to be there, quietly, with presence rather than answers. His life before Emma felt distant now, like another man's story. But peace, he'd come to learn, often wore borrowed time. It happened on a Tuesday, a phone call, brief, clinical. "Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Lunsford's office. We need to schedule a follow-up. Your results came back, and there's something we need to discuss." Just like that, the floor shifted beneath him. He didn't answer immediately, just gripped the phone tighter, breath caught. "Is it urgent?" he asked. "We'd like to see you this week." After he hung up, the penthouse felt colder. The walls loomed higher. Even the sound of Emma humming in the next room didn't ease the sudden pressure in his chest. He didn't tell her. Instead, he smiled through dinner, laughed when she asked if raccoons could climb buildings, tucked her in as usual, but something in his chest stayed clenched. He sat in the dark afterward, the hallway quiet, his hand pressed to his ribs. The next morning, Grace found him staring at a framed photo Emma had taken of the two of them on the rooftop garden, her tiny hand gripping his, both of them squinting against the sun. "You're pale," Grace said softly. "Just tired." "No, it's more than that." He didn't respond. Grace stepped closer. "Benjamin, what's going on?" He hesitated. Then, "I might be sick." "Might?" "They found something. I don't know yet." She sat beside him, hands clasped. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," he said, his voice low. "The idea of her losing someone again. I can't let that happen." "You don't get to decide that." "I know, but I want to prepare, just in case." Grace was quiet a long time, then, "If it's serious, she needs to know." "Not yet. Please." The hospital was cold, the lighting too bright. He sat in the consultation room with the folder in his lap, the doctor's voice explaining things, phrases like early stage, monitoring, treatment options. It wasn't terminal, it wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't nothing. Benjamin nodded through it all, calm on the outside, though his thoughts spiraled. Time. That's what it came down to. How much of it he had. How to use it wisely. He left the clinic and drove around the city for hours without purpose, windows down, the wind cold against his skin. When he finally returned home, Emma was asleep on the couch, her doll tucked beside her, a blanket halfway off her shoulder. On the table was a note in her handwriting. "I waited for you. I painted the sky again." He stood there, watching her sleep, and for the first time in decades, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't tell her the next day, or the day after. Instead, he began writing again. Not documents, not legal strategy, letters. One for each birthday she hadn't reached yet. One for the day she might fall in love. One for when she doubted herself. One for when she needed to remember where she came from. He stored them in a locked drawer in his study, writing long into the night while Emma dreamed upstairs. And in the daylight, he stayed the same. Mostly, she started to notice small changes. "You walk slower," she said once. "It's the shoes," he replied with a smile. "You didn't drink your coffee again." Forgot. She watched him carefully now, like she knew something he hadn't said. Children had a way of knowing what adults tried to bury. Then, one afternoon, it unraveled. Emma came home from a visit with Daniel, quiet, unusually so. She went straight to the studio, didn't ask for snacks, didn't turn on the TV. Benjamin followed her a few minutes later and found her sitting in front of a blank canvas. She looked up as he entered, eyes wide. "Is something wrong with you?" He froze. "What do you mean?" Daniel said sometimes grown-ups don't tell kids when they're sick because they don't want them to worry. His chest tightened. "I'm not dying, Emma. But are you sick?" He sat beside her slowly, silent for a long time before nodding. "Yes, a little. The doctors found something, but they think I'll be okay." "Promise?" "I can't promise that, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere right now." She looked down. "I don't want another goodbye." "I know," he whispered. "Neither do I." She leaned against him, and he held her there in the soft golden light of late afternoon, the sound of her breath the only thing anchoring him to the moment. That night, she placed her doll on his nightstand. "For you," she said. "I think she'll miss you," he replied. "She told me she's okay staying with you tonight." He smiled, touched the doll's faded dress, and turned off the light. The future was uncertain. The courts, Daniel, his health, it was all in flux. But in that quiet, candle-soft dark, he understood something deeper than fear. Emma had already chosen him, and no illness, no judge, no man, no one could take that away. Summer rolled into the city with a strange stillness. Heat clinging to the buildings, air heavy with the scent of concrete and blooming things. For the first time in months, there were no hearings scheduled, no surprise court filings, no medical calls that twisted Benjamin's stomach. In that absence, a quiet life began to form. Emma thrived in it. She ran barefoot through the rooftop garden, a wide-brimmed hat perched crooked on her head. She named the potted plants like pets. She danced to old jazz on the record player and invented games that made no sense unless you were 6 and had survived the kind of losses adults couldn't fathom. Benjamin watched all of it with something close to awe. It amazed him how children could rebuild joy from fragments. He didn't try to direct it anymore. He simply stayed close, a constant presence. And in that constancy, Emma flourished, but it couldn't last untouched. One Thursday morning, Rosa knocked gently on the study door. "Daniel called," she said. "He's asking if Emma would come spend a full day with him. Just them, no supervision, no structure." Benjamin didn't respond at first. Rosa stepped back, sensing the weight behind his silence. He stared out the window for a long time before going to Emma, who was in the studio, coloring a row of foxes in impossible colors. "Daniel called," he said carefully. "He asked if you'd like to spend a day with him. Just the two of you." She didn't look up. "Where?" He didn't say exactly. "He just wants time." She paused, the orange crayon suspended mid-air. "Can I say no?" "Of course." Another pause. "Can I say yes and still come home?" His throat tightened. "Yes, always." She looked at him and he saw the storm behind her eyes, the tug between curiosity and safety, the fear of betrayal, the hope for something real. "I'll go," she said softly, "but just for the day." The morning of the visit, she wore a dress Benjamin had never seen her choose before, one her mother had left behind in a box of things the court had returned. Yellow with lace on the sleeves. She didn't say much as she ate breakfast. She held her juice with both hands. And when Daniel arrived at the door, she froze for a heartbeat before walking forward. Benjamin stayed behind, watching, waiting. The hours crawled. He cleaned his study, twice, tried to read, failed. Sat in Emma's studio, flipping through her sketchpads, each page like a diary she didn't know she was keeping. One showed 3 hearts, red, grey and gold, floating above 3 different trees. One had roots that went deep. One had broken branches. One was just beginning to bloom. He wasn't sure which heart was his. When the intercom buzzed that evening, he was already waiting by the door. Emma stepped in quietly. Daniel gave a respectful nod, then left without saying much. He looked tired, or thoughtful, or both. Benjamin turned to her. "Hey." She didn't answer, just slipped off her shoes and walked into the living room, where she curled into her usual corner of the couch. He gave her time. Finally, she said, "He took me to the lake." Benjamin sat beside her. "Did you like it?" "I liked the water and the ducks." "And Daniel?" She hesitated. "He's still figuring me out." "Do you want him to?" "I think so, but it's slow." She leaned into him, head on his shoulder. "He asked me if I wanted to come live with him one day." Benjamin's jaw tensed, but his voice remained even. "And what did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." A silence settled over them. Then Emma whispered, "But I already know." He looked down at her. "Know what?" "That I'm home already." The next morning she was back to herself, running through the hallway in mismatched socks, singing a made-up song about clouds. But something had shifted. There was a new calm in her movements, a sense of decision made. Later that day, while Benjamin prepared lunch, she placed a drawing on the counter. It was a picture of 2 houses, one with a tree full of fruit, one with a bird perched on the windowsill. A path connected them. Between the houses was a small figure, arms outstretched. Above her was a word, written carefully in block letters, "Both." Benjamin looked at her. "This is how you feel?" She nodded. "He's not everything, but he's not nothing." He folded the paper gently. "Neither are you," he said. That night, he sat alone on the rooftop with Grace. "She's making peace with it," he said, "before I've had the chance to." "You've already made peace," Grace replied. "You just didn't realize it yet. She still chooses me." "Yes, but now she doesn't have to only choose you." He was quiet. Then, "That's harder than I thought." Grace touched his hand. "It means you've done it right." Summer deepened. Daniel came by more often, still respectful, still slow. Sometimes he stayed for tea. Sometimes he brought Emma a carving, one of a bear, one of a girl with wings. Emma displayed them next to her original bird and doll, a small altar to the parts of her life she'd allowed to survive. She began writing stories, little books made of folded paper. Some were about foxes who built cities, some about rivers that whispered names, but always, at the end, someone came home. Always. Benjamin read everyone, and he realized something else. Emma no longer feared being taken, because she now knew what it meant to belong, not just to someone, but to herself. Autumn passed gently that year, as if the city itself had softened its breath. Trees lined the avenues like brushstrokes of amber and fire, their leaves fluttering toward the ground in slow motion farewells. The air had a hush to it, like the world was waiting for something or someone to let go. Benjamin Carter felt it in his bones. There was no dramatic decline, no sudden collapse or dramatic hospital stays, only the steady erosion of energy, the kind that quietly rewrites how a man moves through the world. He walked slower, spoke softer, needed help with things he once did without thinking. But the pain wasn't in the body, it was in the clock. In the moments when Emma asked him to read and he couldn't keep his eyes open. In the way she tucked him into bed some nights, whispering, "You sleep, I'll watch." She was watching, all the time now. Not with panic, but with a tenderness that broke him in ways even illness hadn't. She wasn't just a child anymore. She had become the guardian of his silence, the keeper of his rhythm. She wasn't afraid of losing him, But she was preparing in the quiet way only children can, and so was he. He had finished the letters, 37 in total, some sealed, others open-ended, all written in the same journal, the one with her name pressed into the leather cover, Emma Collins Carter. In early November, he asked Daniel to come. They met on the rooftop, the sky overcast but calm. "I want to make something official," Benjamin said, handing him a folder. Daniel opened it. Inside were documents, power of attorney, emergency contact transfers, legal instructions. "I want her to stay here with Grace if anything happens to me," Benjamin said. "But I want you to be involved, not out of obligation, because she trusts you now, and I think you've earned it." Daniel blinked, surprised. "You're not yet," Benjamin said. "But I won't lie. Time feels louder lately." Daniel sat on the bench beside him. "She's changed me," he said quietly. "I used to think being a parent meant showing up once you had your life together, but now I know it means showing up even when you don't." Benjamin gave a tired smile. "Welcome to the club." They sat there for a long time, watching the city settle into dusk. The first snow came the week after Thanksgiving. Emma was the first to notice. She ran barefoot onto the balcony in her pajamas, arms stretched to the sky, laughing as the flakes melted against her cheeks. Benjamin stood behind the glass, leaning on the doorframe, watching her. The image was so perfect it ached. Her joy was untouched by fear, and in that moment he let himself believe, just for a breath, that maybe the world would always protect her like this. She came back inside, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. "It's snowing," she declared. "I saw." "Do you think it's the same snow from that night?" He looked at her. "The night we met," she clarified. "I remember the rain. But maybe it was really snow pretending to be rain." He smiled. "Maybe it was." She grabbed his hand. "Let's write about it, so we never forget." They sat together at the kitchen table, two notebooks open, pens scratching across the page. She wrote slowly, tongue between her teeth. He wrote as best he could, his hands slower now, his eyes blurring more than usual. But he didn't stop. Not yet. In mid-December, she asked the question he'd been waiting for. "Are you dying?" He paused. They were sitting in the library, her head on his shoulder, a book closed in his lap. "I don't know when," he said honestly, "but eventually, yes." She nodded. "Will it hurt?" "Not too much. The doctors are helping with that." "Are you scared?" "A little." She looked at him. "I'm not." He turned to her. "Because you already taught me how to stay," she said. He couldn't speak, only kissed the top of her head and closed his eyes, the weight of that sentence pressing against his chest like Grace. Christmas came quietly. Grace stayed with them. Daniel came by in the morning, left in the afternoon. There were no crowds, no noise, just a small tree, paper ornaments, and gifts wrapped in fabric instead of paper, Emma's idea. "So the wrapping can be a blanket later." Benjamin gave her a compass. "Why a compass?" she asked. "So you never forget how to find your way home." She held it like treasure. He didn't open any gifts. He didn't need to. That night, he slept longer than usual, dreamed deeper. When he woke, Emma was in the armchair by his bed, reading one of his letters out loud to the doll on her lap. She looked up. "You write like you're telling the sky a secret." "Maybe I am." "Don't worry," she said. "I won't tell it." He smiled. "That's why I trust you." On New Year's Eve, he sat by the window with her as fireworks cracked silently across the skyline. "We made it," she whispered. He nodded. "You don't have to stay up," he said. "I know." She laid her head against his shoulder. "But I want to." The lights painted her face in colors that shifted too fast to hold. Her eyes stayed open longer than his, her breath quiet and steady. When he finally dozed off, she placed his hand over her heart and whispered, "You'll always live here now." And he did, even as the clock turned, even after. Not every family is born from blood. Sometimes it's built in shared silences, in choices made on ordinary days, in the hand you offer when someone has nothing left to hold. Benjamin Carter never expected redemption to come on a rainy night. But there, facing a quiet, soaked little girl, Something inside him shifted, not by accident but by fate. Emma didn't save Benjamin from loneliness. She taught him how to live inside it. She showed him that love doesn't need to be explained, only given. That staying isn't about promising forever, but being present, here and now, with everything you are. And when time eventually demanded what no money could buy, he had already left her the only thing that mattered. Not a legacy of power, but of presence. An emotional compass Emma would carry with her for the rest of her life. Because in the end, what remains are not names etched in buildings, but words whispered in the hearts we've touched. And you, do you believe love can rewrite even the most unlikely fates? Leave your comment and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories.